Well, hi there. Taylor with Prep Talk. Wanted to continue the story of what my son and I experienced in the Louisiana and Mississippi area during Hurricane Katrina. And in the last segment, you might remember we had had this adventure in Jackson, Mississippi, where we had dropped off our friend Alvin that we had found stranded on the side of the road and got him put up in a hotel, got a little bit of food, but most importantly, we were actually able to get $200 worth of cash out of an ATM. Just a total freak deal, but we were able to get it. So we were feeling lots better about the fact that we now had cash in our pockets and could put together an escape strategy to get out of the area. Well, as we headed back in the dark, the city was totally dark, all the highways were dark. So we headed back on I-20 towards Meridian, Mississippi. We realized that this town car that we had been driving wasn't the most fuel economical vehicle that we could have rented. And we were all the way down to about a half of a tank and figured that by the time we got back to Meridian, we could be close to a quarter to a third of a tank, which just wouldn't be enough fuel to really enable us to get out of there. Our game plan was to head towards Texas. So we had just hoped that somehow, some way we could find a place where we could get some gas. And so as we're headed back towards Meridian, since it is dark, all of a sudden it's very easy to see lights that are in the area, which is kind of a freaky deal. You expect all the lights to be off. And so off to the left-hand side of the road, we could see some lights out through the trees. And so we immediately took the exit off of that freeway that was closest to those lights and circled around and came back where they were. And sure enough, there was a gas station there that had power. But not only did they have power, they had a ton of people in line trying to get gas. In fact, as we kind of cruised along, seeing how many people were actually in this line, it was close to a mile long. Not only was it an extraordinarily long line, but they had 3 or 4 policemen that were there that were kind of circulating around and stopped there by the actual pumps to make sure that things were done in an orderly fashion. Well, we realized that if we chose to stay there and wait in line, we may never get gas and it may take us far too long. And so we decided to abandon that idea and get back on the road towards Meridian. As we got back on the road, probably not more than another 5 or 6 miles down to the road, once again, we saw some lights. This time it was off to the right-hand side of the road, and so we took the exit that was closest to the lights and drove into this little community. And it was like it was abandoned, although there was lights there. And as we drove through the main street, all of a sudden we could see this gas station up on the right. But this gas station was totally different than the one that we had seen earlier. There were no cars there. In fact, as we got closer, we saw that there were 3 police cars at the gas station. One police car was blocking one entrance, a second police car was blocking a second entrance, and a third police car was actually in there filling up with gas. Well, there happened to be actually 3 entrances to this gas station. And so figuring, what the hey, let's go ahead and try to get some gas here. So we pulled in on the opposite side of the pump where the officer was filling his car. And this is where something truly amazing happened, because it's as if we became invisible. It's as if nobody knew we were there. Nobody recognized the fact that we were getting gas, and it was just amazing. And so as we pulled up to this pump, I jumped out of the car real quick and did something that I know I was prompted to do, because had I not done it, we never would have received any gas. And that was this. Just out of habit, I reached for my wallet, I pulled out my credit card and slid it into the pump. Now remember, just a short time before this, I had just been able to get $200 cash out of an ATM. So I had cash there that I could have paid for that gas. But just for whatever reason, I used my credit card. Now keep in mind, almost everywhere else where I tried to use a credit card, it would not work. The credit card system wouldn't work. But To my surprise, it worked on this pump. So I immediately grabbed the nozzle off of the pump and shoved it into the gas tank and started pumping gas. And I remember just squeezing that nozzle as hard as I could, trying to get the gas to go in as fast as possible. And I could see the officer just on the other side of the pump filling his car, but I didn't want to look. I didn't want to make any eye contact, and he didn't say anything to us. So I just kept going and squeezing hard and going, and pretty soon we heard, the click, which means, that the tank is full. And so I topped it off as much as I could, then put it back. And then something unique happened in that typically the pump then will print you a receipt. And, on a business trip, I like to keep those receipts. And so I waited for that receipt to print out, but none came. So I thought, okay, well then I'll walk into the little office, and once again, those little mini mart deals by the pumps, and see if I can't get a receipt from the cashier inside. So as I'm walking towards the office there, the store, all of a sudden this big burly cop steps out in front of me and says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, I'm just coming to get a receipt. He says, "A receipt for what?" And I said, "Well, a receipt for gas." And he said, "How did you get gas?" I said, "Well, we just pulled in and I put my credit card in the pump." And he said, "Well, the credit cards don't work." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but it worked for me, and I'd simply like to get a receipt." And he just kind of looked at me and with a scowl on his face, and then he turned around and he looked at the cashier and then looked back at me and looked at her again, and she just kind of nodded. And so he stepped aside and let me get in and get the receipt. And then I made tracks back to the car, told my son, "Man, just punch it. Get out of here as quick as you can." And so we whipped around and got out there and got back on the road. That was really a miracle, because had we not been able to get our tank filled at that time, we wouldn't have been able to make it out in any timely fashion anyway. We wouldn't have been able to escape from the things that were taking place. And so I'll continue this story as we roll into Meridian on my next segment, and then how we actually end up getting out of the area that was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. So until next time, thanks.